Women in menopause deal with issues that are hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, painful intercourse, low libido, weight gain, irritability, memory issues. And what happened is that they don't want that. Nobody wants those kind of symptoms. Again, symptom is not a disease, it's a symptom. And they try anything to solve that problem. So they go to the doctor. And the doctor says, well, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Men make testosterone, women make estrogens. So there is not a full education, which I think in the day and age in which we live, in which everything we can find is pretty much at our hands, in our hands, we can just look at the phone. Doctors too many times are still telling women real simple, you make estrogens, a man makes testosterone. I tell you that 99% of men, in my opinion, from what I have noticed, 99% of men have never heard of the word estradiol. Estradiol, one of the estrogens. We make it from our testosterone every day. So men should know about it, that when they go to the doctor to complain about testosterone, that they maybe at some point do a blood test, not just on testosterone only, but also on estradiol. Because if the ratio between those two hormones is out of balance, it can cause all kinds of problems in a man's health. Anyway, so women are going to menopause and doctors say, well, you're out of estrogen, so I'm going to give you estradiol. I'm going to give you an estradiol. So, as I mentioned earlier, pharmaceutical companies are not allowed to take from Mother Nature and to literally put that in a capsule. You cannot patent it. So what doctors had to figure out, or pharmaceutical companies had to figure out, was how can we find this estradiol hormone in nature? And they noticed that if they took the urine from a pregnant horse, pull the estradiol out of that and synthesize it, they were able to make an estrogen prescription drug, which is called Premarin. That stands for pregnant mare's urine, Premarin. And they started giving this to women. Now, in order to prove to the FDA that it was really safe, they decided to initiate a study. That study was called the Women's Health Initiative, WHI. It was a study that was done between 1996 and 2004. More than 100,000 women participated in the study. All these women were dealing with hot flashes and night sweats and dryness. They were miserable. And by getting the estradiol in the form of a synthetic Premarin, they all participated in the study. So what was given to them was just an estrogen, no other hormones. Like we said, women in ovulating years, menstruating years, make 5 hormones every month. Estradiol, estrone, progesterone, testosterone, and DHEA, the youth hormone. In menopause, all these disappear. Doctors give women only one, estradiol, in the form of Premarin. And lo and behold, women started feeling better. Said, oh my God, these are miracle drugs. But in 2001, only 5 years into the study was stopped. Why? Because of the amount of women who were diagnosed with a breast cancer, an ovarian cancer, a cervical cancer, fallopian cancer, uterine cancer. Women were getting heart attacks and they were dying. They were not only diagnosed, but they had already died. So first they chalked it up to, well, coincidence. But so many women were experiencing this that they literally said, we got to stop this study because this is not good. And there are still plenty of medical doctors who simply say that the study was flawed. It was not a study I did. It was a study done by reputable sources who said, we're going to prove that this works. So what actually happened is that when you give a woman estrogen without progesterone, what happens is you create an imbalance. And that is why this happened. Now, I learned about this from another medical doctor, and his name is Dr. Don Colbert. I think he has a clinic in Florida, but he wrote a book. I think he wrote a few, but one book is called The Hormone Health Zone. Let me explain to you, because this is all important for if you're young, if you're old, whatever it is, this is something you need to know. Women make 5 hormones, but these hormones are stimulated by a hormone produced by the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is in the brain, and it makes 8 hormones. We can go into that as well. But 2 of those hormones are called the follicle stimulating hormone, FSH. The other one is called luteinizing hormone. The follicle stimulating hormone does exactly what it is supposed to do. It stimulates the follicle, the ovary, to produce those hormones in the egg so that when the ovulation happens, you have the hormones going into the fallopian tube. The luteinizing hormone is more involved with the production of progesterone. My understanding is that the natural progesterone happens when the follicle opens, the hormones come out, but out of the edge of the follicles, there is progesterone going into the fallopian tube. Luteinizing hormone is involved with that part. Every month, a woman's follicle stimulating hormone is stimulating that ovary to produce the follicle, to produce the hormones. So every month, that follicle stimulating hormone does its job and say, okay, make hormones, okay, make hormones, make hormones, make hormones. Now women hit menopause. And what happens is the follicle stimulating hormone says, make your hormones. And the ovary says, sorry, boss, no can do. There's no more hormones. No, you don't get it. Check the fridge. Check in the attic. Check that back room over there. Just keep looking. I need my hormones. And the ovary says, no, I'm shooting blanks. There's nothing happening here. So it goes to the other ovary. What about you? No, I don't have anything anymore either. So a woman now is out of blanks, out of hormones, and the follicle stimulating hormone realizes it's going on the unemployment line. It loses its job, and it gets angry. It says, no, I want to keep my job. So it starts raising its voice, so to say. So the follicle stimulating hormone goes up. And this is what Dr. Colbert talks about in his book, where he says that when a woman ovulates, you check the follicle stimulating hormone, and the follicle stimulating hormone will be numbered anywhere between 5 and 19, 20 maybe. But he says, in menopause, the follicle stimulating hormone goes above the number 23. 23. So, if you are in menopause and you're dealing with the issues of menopause, get a blood test and find out where your FSH is, and even the luteinizing hormone. If the FSH is above 23, it explains your symptoms. So this is really interesting, where doctors have told many women that when they have the menopausal symptoms, it's because they lost their estrogen, and they give women Premarin. Women lose all the hormones. You lose your testosterone, you lose your progesterone, you lose your estrogens, you lose your DHEA. They're all gone. So the real solution is not to just give women a form of estrogen, but to give them all the hormones. Bring the hormones back to a much more youthful number. And you'll notice that the symptoms disappear. Why? Because, go back to that Women's Health Initiative research 100,000 women, right? They all were given Premarin, and the symptoms disappeared. So what medical doctors and research were saying, see, you give a woman estrogen, she has no more problems. So when women were menstruating and they had PMS, the doctors would say, it's your estrogen, stupid. We just have to lower the estrogen with the pill, get pregnant, wait till menopause, clean-up surgery, hysterectomy, and antidepressants. Now they're saying, well, you lost your estrogens, that's why there is a problem. So all of a sudden, estrogens become the hero. But this is what happens according to Dr. Colbert. He says that FSH, when it's getting angry and yells at the ovaries and says, hey, produce some hormones, and there's none anymore, the FSH actually starts to go up. It gets red in the face and is screaming and yelling, and by raising its voice, it just goes up. And he says when the FSH gets above 23, you will see an increase in these menopausal symptoms. And he said, so we have to bring the FSH down. So what happened in that test in 1996 to 2004, which ended up in 2001, they started giving women estrogen. So now estrogens are coming up, and the FSH is red hot, and it looks over and it sees the estradiol come up, and it says, you know, you're not perfect, you're kind of synthetic, but I still see something coming up. So I'm sure that the other hormones are not far behind. So the FSH starts to relax. And by the follicle stimulating hormone coming down to less than 23, all the menopausal symptoms disappear. But what happens now is by bringing up the estrogen, and you have no support from the progesterone, women developed estrogen dominance in menopause or progesterone deficiency, which then resulted in them having cancers of the female organs. I hope this makes sense. So the FSH goes up, is yelling. When the FSH goes up, menopausal symptoms come in. By doctors giving estrogens, the FSH says, oh, something is coming, I can probably relax, and the symptoms are disappearing. But by letting the symptoms disappear because the FSH goes down, now all we have is estrogen, or estradiol, whatever it is, but we don't have the chaperone. So now you develop one of the symptoms that women would have in menopause, during their PMS, was female-related cancers. So now the cancers are screaming and they're coming up. Now, also women were dying of heart disease, which is really interesting. Dr. Platt, in one of his books about the bioidentical hormone, says testosterone is the #1 hormone for building bone. So what happens to women in menopause? Osteopenia, osteoporosis. Number 2, testosterone is the #1 hormone to protect the heart. Interesting. Women were getting heart attacks in this study. Testosterone is the #1 hormone for the heart. Every muscle in our body needs testosterone. And the heart is the hardest working muscle we have. It's one of those muscles you never want to relax and go on vacation. So you don't make any more testosterone in menopause, increase in heart attacks and strokes in women in menopause. The third thing, testosterone, is the #1 hormone to help prevent Alzheimer's. Well, that's quite something. Who gets Alzheimer's? Young women, older women. Okay, so testosterone may be one of the triggers of dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, the interesting thing what Dr. Platt says, progesterone, which you don't make anymore in menopause either, is the #2 hormone for preventing Alzheimer's, protecting the heart, and helping to build bone. So again, for women in menopause, don't be afraid to start using progesterone. And then women say, well, how much can I use? I said, well, I'm a guy and I never menstruated or had a menopause. I used 200 milligrams a day and I felt great. Can I use 200 milligram? Why don't you try it? Use it, put it on the skin, and let's see how you feel. Don't be afraid to use it. You can always come back to 50 milligram or 25. Leave that up to you. You can always come down. But there is no damage done by going higher on the progesterone. So for menopausal women, for women ovulating, menstruating, by all means, women who have been pregnant, by all means, use progesterone. Don't be afraid to use it. It's not addictive, but it is super duper beneficial.